Welcome to Under the Microscope. This series is brought to you by the Real Scientists Nano team. Our goal is to provide a platform where scientists can communicate their work and interact with the public. With that in mind, every week we introduce you to a scientist working in the field of materials and nanoscience, who would be curating the RealSci_Nano Twitter account. Hi everyone, today we have with us Peter Sherrell, who is a research fellow at the Department of Chemical Engineering at the University of Melbourne in Australia. Hi Peter, how are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited to hear about your science because on the short podcast, it sounds so fascinating. So
Thank you.
so let's dive in. So let's start with your scientific journey so far. So could you tell us how did you end up in your current research field?
So I sort of from a young age, even primary school and high school, I was always interested in science. And when I was looking at a university degree, nanotechnology was sort of the new hot thing. And so it sort of grabbed my attention and I went into it. And the further I got into it, the sort of that I became. And it so happened the University of Wollongong, where I did my PhD, they had one of these big centers called an ARC Center of Excellence that was looking at electromaterial science. So they studied things like batteries, supercapacitors, and nowadays they focus a lot on sort of electrical stimulation for tissue engineering, making artificial organs and things like this. And so that sort of grabbed my interest really quickly, and we had such a huge amount of people doing great research. It sort of pulled me in. And so I did my PhD on trying to make carbon nanotubes in these really funky, interesting structures, and yeah, had a huge amount of fun doing it, and sort of lit my passion for all the different types of research you could do, and the international travel, and the conferences, and the networking. It just got in from sort of step by step, and went down the rabbit hole, I guess.
I like the term "went down the rabbit hole" because the world of nanoscience and technology is just so fascinating. So I can completely imagine because it was very similar to me as well, for me as well. So completely understand. All right, super. So from working with the carbon nanotubes during your PhD, so like right now, where do you think, or where do you see your current research falling in this big picture of materials or nanoscience? Where do you fit in this big puzzle?
So I really fit on the fundamental side.
Okay.
So I do a lot of research into how we can make new nanomaterials and how we combine different nanomaterials together to get, a brand new property. So there's two things I've done I think are really cool way. We figured out a way to grow two nanomaterials together directly in a single step, two different 2D nanomaterials, and we've used this to make fuel from water using just sunlight very efficiently, and that was really cool. And on a completely different end of a spectrum, we've taken a very similar 2D material and put it in a polymer. And this 2D material changes how the polymer arranges around it, and it makes the device harvest energy from motion really efficiently, extremely efficiently. And so these are completely on opposite ends of the scale, really. One is a very hard process where we're building an electrode, and one's making this soft, flexible patch. But they both come about understanding of nanomaterial build into an application. So I fit really broadly across it from the fundamental side. Then I find I need to collaborate to drive the applications. But
Right. So you're basically bringing the basic sciences and application science together, or you're like the bridge between the basic and the application because you're actually making these materials.
Yeah, so I'm a bridge. So on one end, you would have the modelers. I would sit in between who will do the synthesis and sort of try to figure out exactly what we've got. Okay, can we make it this way? Can we make it this way? And then we'll have more the engineers on the other side, which is really good working in a chemical engineering department, who can figure out, right, we've got these really cool materials with these really cool properties. Here's how we can build a brand new device out of it that's useful for people.
Okay, so you're basically covering not just from basic to applied sciences, but you're also covering the different kinds of nanomaterials. Like you mentioned, you do the polymers and then 2D materials embedded in polymers. So it's like polymers, 2D materials, like everything. It's a mix of everything, basically.
Very broad, very broad.
Which is
Well,
what
one of
nanoscience is about, right? It's quite
yes,
broad.
yeah, well, one of the challenges for me is you quite often get asked, what what is it that your research boils down to? What's the one thing you are better than anyone else to do? And I'm great at what I do, but what I do is so broad, and there's it's so interesting the different ways you can go from these fundamental things. And one of the things I think I'm strong at together, bringing the right team together to drive science forward, because you can't do it by yourself these days. And so it's about finding the people you can work with who have the knowledge and also have the personality to want to collaborate and work really well. And that's the fun part for me.
Ah, that's great. I'm so happy that you think that this is fun, that interdisciplinary work and collaborating with different experts in their own fields. I'm so happy that that's the way you see it. It's very refreshing, I must say. All right, super. So it does sound to me that you do a lot of interesting, and you have done also in the past, do a lot of interest, have been part of a lot of interesting research projects. And I'm sure you are also right now. So if I ask you to pick one research project that you're most proud of, or the most fun or quirky one, I know it's difficult. I know it's really difficult to pick just one, but if you have to pick one that you're most proud of, can you do that and explain it to us in simple words in the section we call In Other Words?
I can.
Okay?
Um, and it's going to be a different bent to the ones I've talked about already.
Okay.
So one of the things that I'm quite proud of, so I just finished my PhD and I was starting not quite a postdoc because in the Australian system you wait about several months after you submit before it comes back.
Okay.
And so what we did was switch from using carbon nanotubes to graphene. And as I mentioned, I was working in an ARC center who was looking at a huge range of different things, but they're looking at tissue engineering. And I have no basis in biology, never done biology, no expertise. I'm a material scientist, and that's the bit I understand. But what we did is we started looking at, can we synthesize graphene? So we developed a way to grow graphene by a process called chemical vapor deposition, which is basically just heating gas up in a furnace and graphene grows on whatever substrate you want. And what the problem they were having is they were looking at trying to apply electric current through stem cells and make them grow into different types, bone or nerve cells or fat cells or something like this. And the problem was the only electrical materials they had a really defined stiffness. So if you tapped them, they would be quite hard, or you couldn't separate that stiffness from them being electrically conductive. They were just connected together. But what we found is if we took graphene, because it's so thin, now graphene's about 1,000 times thinner than a human hair, 10,000 times. I've forgotten the number. I
It's
apologize
really
for that.
good.
Really, really thin, really, really thin. And you put it on polymers. What you find is the cells don't see the graphene at all. So you could put graphene on any polymer at all, no matter how soft or how stiff, and you could make it electrically conductive, at least on the surface. And so we showed that we could then, make cells go off the mechanical cues of the polymers, that is how hard they are, super soft like a rubber or super tough like a rigid chair or your computer monitor or something like this. And we could change how the cells responded, and that was really cool because no one had done it at the time.
That is so cool. I can completely understand why you picked this project as the one that the most fun or quirky one. So you took the polymers, you coated the CVD grown graphene, so chemical vapor deposited graphene, you coated the polymers with this graphene, and then you cultured cells around them so
Yeah.
that they
So
grow in the right direction or way.
yep. So basically, what we did is we cultured cells on top of them, and we compared just the cells growing on the graphene and showed, hey, look, they grow fine. And then we tried applying an electric field through the graphene. So, well, an electric current across the graphene. And
Right.
what that did is it made the cells grow much, much quicker and very differently. So we saw a lot of what's called neurite outgrowth. So what that means is you get little filaments coming out from the cell that show the cell's really, really happy. So we
Uh-huh.
could see these network of cells growing together much, much quicker and much, much, I guess, yeah, happier, for want of a more technical term, on the substrates with the graphene and the electrical stimulation. And we could see if we did it on a soft, it would work really well, and we did it on a hard polymer, it would work, a lot less well. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
before, with all the materials people were using previously, they didn't have a choice. It was just the hard polymer they could do with
Right.
electrical stimulation. So
Right. Right. Wow, that is so cool. So you basically use graphene to first of all make the cells so neurons happy and healthy, and grow faster. And then was graphene also useful in terms of making the kinds of shapes that you wanted, like I don't know, spherical, rectangular. I'm sure there is no
we
rectangular cells, but.
no, we didn't try that way. We didn't really try too much with patterning or anything like that. One of the
Uh-huh.
things that people have gone on to do building on this work is make channels of conductive material and
Uh-huh.
non-conductive material on a soft polymer. And the cells will stick to the conductive material and form tracks. So if you're looking at something like spinal cord regeneration, you can
Uh-huh.
start to talk about how you can get, a chain of cells all aligned in a certain way.
Uh-huh.
And it forms the very, 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 very preliminary precursor to something that could eventually lead towards spinal regeneration or something like this.
Ah, okay. Wow. Wow. This sounds cool. I mean, you did mention that your favorite nanomaterial is carbon nanotubes. Do you still stick by that, or do you
Yeah,
switch?
yeah, yeah. Yeah. I'm very visual, and fundamentally a one-dimensional material, which carbon nanotube is, can assemble itself in so many more ways than a two-dimensional material.
True. That is true. Fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Super. This is fascinating. I hope this work is published and it's somewhere that people are using this and building on this to
Yeah,
make new discoveries.
I
Um,
hope so.
Super, that sounds fascinating. Awesome. So, Peter, let's move away from lab a bit. Let's move away a little bit from the lab and go into the. Let's talk a little bit about other parts of a researcher's life, usually an academic researcher's life, which is teaching or bringing transferring knowledge to the next generation. So do you do that in some way, or do you want to do that, or could you talk about it this little bit?
Yeah, so at the moment, we're still in a COVID lockdown, and so teaching is, a bit of a challenge at the moment. Everything's pre-recorded and delivered to students that way. But what I really get a lot of value out in terms of transferring knowledge, as you mentioned, is sort of the mentorship over the next generation of researchers. So I really enjoy taking PhD students, master students, and honors students, and final year project students, sort of, and seeing them develop and trying to transfer the skills that I've learned over my career to them. That's where I really enjoy and get a lot of satisfaction, because you can see a lot of progression. I find I really enjoy lecturing as well, but especially at the moment where it's remotely, it's so hard to build that engagement,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a little bit of a challenge. But I've given a lot of I tend to teach surrounding the material science side, so electrochemistry, materials characterization, soft materials, carbon nanomaterials, and 2D materials is sort of what I like teaching. And they tend to be a bit more specialized, so I tend to teach sort of, again, the more senior students, so third year, fourth years, and things like this is sort of where my expertise fits. But we'll have to see what happens, when we return to face-to-face learning in the coming years. Really looking forward to students again in person,
Mm-hmm.
seeing how they've developed and engaging with them that way.
Yeah, yeah. That's. I think the world is waiting for that, in a sense, to
Yes.
meet people in person and interact with them in person. And I really liked what you mentioned, that the mentoring part of the next generation, mentoring the next generation of scientists. I think that's also very important. Um, and I hope you get to do that in a to a broader set of students soon enough. All right, super. So let's move on with your researcher side. Let's dial back to your researcher side, and let's talk a bit about your research experience. And I hope your experience has been wonderful so far and will continue to be wonderful in the future as well. However, if you had three wishes to improve your research experience, what would you ask for? And I'm not promising anything here.
Oh, look, I think I've had a quite positive journey through my career. I've traveled and been to wonderful places. I've done a postdoc in Sweden. I've had a Marie Curie fellowship in the UK, and now I'm obviously back in Australia working. But one of the things that's really challenging, where again from a more junior perspective, is when you get your PhD and you start a postdoc, you're on such short-term contracts and there's such poor job security and clarity around future career paths. There's obviously opportunities to translate into industry, but that's also a bit specialized. So it's really, what I'd like, not necessarily to improve mine at this point, but again to improve the next generation, is really finding a mechanism to improve job security, or at least clarity of what to expect for people coming through the system. Because we're generating so many new PhDs these days. We're generating such a brilliant skilled workforce, a brilliant skilled group of people, and where the job's coming from is going to be really challenging, especially with all the impact of the current environment coming up. So that's really the big one for me. There's a couple of other little things, like I think it's really highlighted at the moment, the need for a greater public understanding of science and a public appreciation of science, and a recognition, I guess, of how scientists communicate themselves. So the difference between a peer-reviewed scientific article and a preprint and these type of things. I think that's actually improved the past few months with all the preprint papers that have come out. But well, at least in media cycles, let's say. But a greater engagement from the general audience, I guess, of how scientists talk, as well as scientists learning to speak in a better language.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, job security or clarity being one, and the second being the communication in general to peers, to public, to scientists from different fields and stuff like that. So that was the second. Do you have a third wish?
I mean, what's really highlighted to me over the past sort of 6 to 7 months for us is it would be really good to have better tools for broad international collaboration. And at the moment, we're very limited in what we're able to do, especially in a country like Australia where our borders are shut, and our movement's reasonably curtailed. But that's, and I think that's getting better all the time. The video conferencing makes life so much easier for international collaboration. But the more tools we can do for, remote automation of lab equipment, so you can send it to an expert's lab and you can, watch while it's running and things like that. They exist for some of the synchrotrons and the really advanced pieces of equipment that exist out there, but, something to work on for the future, trying to bring the scientific world closer together.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I also loved your third wish, that bringing the world closer together, the scientific world as well. And I hope with the current situation that we are living in, most of the conferences or workshops are moving, like happening virtually instead of in person, so that hopefully allows for more collaboration and like brings the world closer together. I know it's quite difficult for networking part, which is an integral part of conferences, that if you're doing a virtual conference, it's very, very important to make sure that the attendees or participants are getting to network with each other, because that's where the collaborations actually begin or flourish.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's hope that all three wishes amazing. I wish I could just be like, yes, tomorrow.
Yes, me too.
Peter, it's all gonna be what you asked for completely. I can't do that unfortunately yet, but I would like to believe that we are working towards it, towards achieving all of your three wishes in the near future. I would like to believe that. The first one might be a bit difficult with the job clarity and security because it involves more than just you and me. But yeah, I would like to believe that we are working towards it and it happens in the near future. And speaking of future, what are you most looking forward to in the next 3 months?
Getting back into the lab, hopefully. The lab for a good 7. Very excited to get back in and get my hands dirty and get some fresh results.
Uh-huh.
The past few months has been spent doing a lot of data analysis, a lot of paper writing, a lot of interpretation, but there's nothing like getting that new discovery, getting the color change in your material, or getting that first image of something brand new. It's what
Oh,
you're
yeah.
after.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the joy of looking at the image for the first time. You're the first person to look at this beautiful nanomaterial or a device that you have created. Ah, the joy. Oh, I miss that. I mean, you can, I guess, to a certain extent, you can still have that when your students send you over the images, but it's not the same.
You're already at least the second person at that point.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And also this when the image is loading, especially on the electron microscopes, that those few seconds or 2, 3 minutes, depending on the resolution of your image, that is just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very odd. The image that appears on the microscope screen is always so much better than the one that ends up in my saved folder on my desktop. I was like, no, it looks so much better. Oh dear.
Yeah, yeah, that is true. Yeah, that is true. And yeah, we thought it's so much better, and then you'll go back to your desk and look at it, and you're like, huh, okay. Yeah, but I can understand that. I can completely understand that. And so, Peter, before we let you go, one last question that I want to understand from you is what do you think are the big challenges faced by the field of materials or nanoscience from your perspective?
I mean, there's a couple. The big one for me with nanotechnology overall is seeing some sort of commercial outcome from the investment in nanoscience.
Mhm.
There's been a huge investment over the past 20 years in things like carbon nanotubes and things like graphene, and the applications are starting to come now, and hopefully will come. But then that's a big challenge as to how we can take all these, the things I've spoken about, these super cool structures, and can we actually make them useful? Do they move from the bench and into something, or does the knowledge that making them give move into something? And I think that's a challenge at the moment. There seems to be a lot of research that doesn't translate that well, and that happens. Research doesn't work every time, but I think one of the challenges of the field is being a little bit more cognizant of how we design our experiments and how we think about where we're going with it. And the second one is, the same side, that fundamental research, which is what I mostly do, that's still amazingly important. And how can we communicate that importance to people? Because if you're talking to people, they want to say, oh, you're working on a battery, you're working on a supercapacitor, you're working on a solar cell. I'm working to something that will lead to this. And so it's communicating that importance to society, but also to governments and funding bodies that continue to support it, because especially in the economic downturn that we're going to experience, it's going to be a bit of a crunch. And so
Mhm.
making sure that the field as a whole can communicate its importance is, I think, one of the big challenges that we're facing.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, both the challenges that you highlighted, that transferring the technology from the lab bench to the market shelf, and also educating people, funding agencies, governments about the importance of fundamental research. Because what you see, the battery that you see in your phone or in your electric car, that's how many years did it take to get there from fundamental research. I think we need to talk about that and we need to inform and educate people about that. Um, yeah, absolutely. So both challenges are completely, yeah, that make complete sense. Absolutely. So thank you very much, Peter. I learned a lot about your research and your research. I keep saying, at the risk of repeating myself, it's so fascinating. It's so cool. So thank you very much for speaking with us and looking forward to
Thank you so
having you.
much.
Our pleasure on Real Scientist Nano. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. To know more about us, please visit our website realscientistsnano.org and follow us on Twitter at realsci_nano.